Hi, I wanted to make a quick video talking about watering. Now that we have annuals down below, I want everybody to be competent and feel comfortable watering, because watering is actually one of the most important parts of growing. You get watering and you time the watering correctly and your plants are going to do great. If you don't, then you will most certainly cause some sort of harm, or the plant will die if you do not water correctly. So a couple ways to check for watering, especially now that we have a bunch of different sized plants and different types of plants around the garden center down below. I'm up in the greenhouse right now, but at least this will still give you an idea of what watering looks like and how to do it. So there's three main ways to check if something needs to be watered. The first is just appearance, and wilting is usually very easy to spot. These petunias right here, they are most certainly wilting. They've been sitting in front of this heater right here, and so it's pretty obvious to me. As soon as I walked into the greenhouse, I know that I need to water those. If you water them in time, they should perk back up. Also, this fuchsia basket, also sitting in front of the heater, really needs a drink. So that's one way of really being able to tell. Second is soil temperature, or I'm sorry, soil color. If you look, you can see kind of a light brown color. That's a good indication that the soil is dry. And then otherwise, if it is not dry and it's wet, you will see some dark soil, which this whole greenhouse is pretty dry, but you can see right there some small plants that haven't grown too much. That soil is pretty dark, and so probably don't need to water it. So the last way is kind of by touch and feel, and obviously, like I just did, you can feel the soil. I mean, you can feel moisture, or you can even just pick up the plant and then tell. I mean, once you do it enough, you can feel when something is light or something is not light, and that's a really easy way to tell if something needs to be watered. So the biggest thing is, if a plant dries out, obviously it's not able to photosynthesize. The cells in the plant then dry out, and then that's what causes that little wilting look. And in overwatering, the issue then becomes lack of oxygen in the plant, and then there is not any airspace. You get anaerobic microbial communities that start to form in the soil. So really important to make sure that you're able to have dry soil so that there's plenty of oxygen for the roots. You don't get root rot and things like that. So when it comes to watering, let's say you've identified some plants that need to be watered and you want to go in and water them, we'll always use a hose with a water breaker, preferably. This way it's a little bit more gentle on the subsurface of the soil, and that way it doesn't just blast the soil way out of the pot. And the other thing to keep in mind as you water is that you don't want to necessarily just drench the plant or the foliage in water. Like if I go to water this, you don't really want to just do this. This doesn't do too much. Reason being, when it's sunny like this, sometimes those water droplets can act like a magnifying glass. You can burn foliage by doing that. Also with wet foliage, if the sun is not out and it doesn't dry, you could introduce certain fungal spores and botrytis or other sorts of mold that can start to grow in the foliage. So when you water, it's always really nice just to get into the pot base right there and just fill up the pot. And that way you don't get a bunch of wet foliage and don't get so much rot or bad fungal spores that start to grow. The other thing is, sometimes when soil gets so dry that it actually doesn't hold water, kind of like a dry sponge. Whenever you have a dry sponge in your sink, you know, it takes a couple tries to actually get the sponge wet. Same thing with the soil. It goes into a state of not being able to take on water, which is called hydrophobic. And the best way to remedy that is to actually water twice. So sometimes you'll water a plant, you'll come back to it in a minute or so, and then it will start to absorb a lot more soil, a lot more water. So it's a good way to kind of introduce water slowly over than just thinking that you've watered something really dry once. In a lot of cases, it will just run right through, and then you actually have to water it again. So when I see these plants here, I've got my camera turned around. Again, you don't want to just like be blasting water, whatever. You want to make sure that it's down and controlled and even. This way you're able to more accurately measure the amount of water that goes into the plants. And like I said, you know, I'm actually going to go over these a second time, because then that will help ensure that the water is getting all the way into the pot. And then even just, you know, it hasn't totally drained yet, but you pick it up and it's so much heavier, and really much better way for the plant to grow. You actually kind of want dry down periods in between waterings. Once again, that oxygen exchange, whenever the pot dries out and that new oxygen comes in, is really healthy for the plant. And so timing watering correctly, where that you're able to water them whenever they need the water, not necessarily if they need it, you'll get a lot better vegetative growth, a lot better blooming, obviously kind of managing that stress. So up here in the greenhouse, we sometimes try to drought stress things. So when we water, I like to wait until things are dry, if we have the time to do that, but not always the case. But I like to wait until things look like they do right now with some dry soil, and then giving them a really good soak, making sure that then they soak everything up. So obviously different containers, different pot sizes are all going to be different types of watering techniques. If you have any questions, you can ask, but once you start doing it, you'll start to learn more, you'll start to feel better about it, and it'll just become kind of second nature. It just becomes muscle memory. So thanks for watching, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, I have a little follow-up to the video of some things that I thought of that I forgot to mention. And I didn't really clearly say that, you know, if something doesn't need to be watered or something's already wet, please do not water it. We'll refer to that as spot watering when watering things, and kind of looking at what is dry and what's not dry, and then kind of watering accordingly. And then second is when you water hanging baskets, Kevin brought up a good point to me that I forgot to mention. So when you're watering a hanging basket, don't just take the nozzle and just smash it down into the middle of the pot like that. It's really good to get underneath the foliage and kind of water it from under here. Otherwise, you kind of end up with this big hole in the center of the pot, and then once it's got a big mark from where the water breaker was, it will not look as good. It doesn't look as symmetrical and round, and so that would just be something else to please be mindful of when you're watering, because we want to keep the same quality for everything. So thank you very much. Bye.